Okay, we are back, and Madam Clerk, if you would please get us started.
Thank you. We're resuming the agenda at item 1.10, work session on the 2016 Draft Comprehensive Plan. And if our presenter would please state his name and title for the record.
I'm Steve Ball, Planning Director with Charles County. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And this afternoon, what I'd like to do is just go over 4 of the proposed amendments that have been discussed for clarification purposes. As you know, the public hearing on the comprehensive plan is scheduled for 4 p.m. today and 6 p.m. And I'll go over the details of all of the amendments. But there's some clarification on 4 items that we'd like to make this afternoon. So the first clarification is regarding Bryan's Road land use amendments. And this is a map that shows the Bryan's Road area as proposed by the Planning Commission. They essentially kept most of the land uses that were in the previous 2006 plan, with the exception of changing some areas to watershed conservation. And then, as one of the proposed amendments, the commissioners talked about removing the industrial land uses surrounding the airport and as changing that to watershed conservation district, as well as the Indian Head Science and Tech Park, and making Bryan's Road Village a mixed-use village area, revising the development district boundaries. And on this map, we had kept a majority of the areas that were residential land uses, because there's a mix of existing development and vacant development. And so we went back and tried to refine this a little bit more to better reflect the recommendation of the commissioners. And that includes looking at the residential land uses south of Highway 210 and east of Marshall Hall Road and making those watershed conservation and not residential, and making sure the mixed-use village is focused more north of Highway 210. And what this map shows you is those areas in the Bryan's Road area that are developed and then undeveloped in brown and have some degree of a subdivision approval, but may still be undeveloped in yellow. And with the refinement and clarification, what we have now in this area is a larger area that's watershed conservation district, and the mixed-use village is on the north part of 210, and we included these 2 areas as watershed conservation district. So I think that's closer to the recommendation as proposed. Also, the revised tier map would be adjusted accordingly. The second clarification of the amendment is regarding the development district, and to make the development district consistent with the PFA boundaries, and the areas outside of the new boundary would be subject to downzoning to lower densities as part of the comprehensive rezoning of the plan. In this area we had talked about previously is predominantly the area referred to as Bennsville, which would be west of Middletown Road, and I can't remember, Bennsville Road, I think it is, yeah. And again, you can see the areas that are vacant is brown, and there's some development, but also some preliminary plans that are not completed. The brown and the yellow would be subject to downzoning.
Excuse me, Mr. Ball, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This was on the previous one, and I just want some clarification. When you talk about preliminary or / pending subdivisions, that could indicate, does that indicate that some of those in there may be either preliminary or subdivision plans that may eventually not go forward because
right.
for any number of reasons, right?
That's right. We have to look at those individually,
right,
and work with our legal staff to determine if they have vested development rights or not.
So so I just want to be clear that that does not indicate that those are actually building permits, that those are going to be built out. Those could actually be more the undeveloped. They could go
Yes,
back
they
to
are. They are in some degree of vacant state.
at this point.
Yes.
But they could also, that just because they're yellow doesn't mean that they're going to be built out.
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. Thank you.
They have some degree of an approval.
Right.
And, there's a whole spectrum of where that is in the process, and we'll have to look into those.
But I didn't want it to be misunderstood that those were necessarily going to be built out.
Right.
Those could remain undeveloped.
Exactly.
While we don't have the data parsed down to the specific geography, countywide, I can tell you there are approximately 6,000 platted lots and another 5,000 that have not been finalized.
Okay.
So they're preliminary, not final,
Excuse me.
and roughly 6,000 countywide.
Would you please just state your name and title for
I'm
the
sorry,
record?
Peter Ludo,
please?
Department of Planning Growth and Management.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to
That's quite all right.
get that clarification.
So the second amendment is with regard to the development district, and we would look at changing the boundary to closer match up the priority funding areas and downzoning, lowering the densities in those areas that were changed. And again, this is the areas in brown, undeveloped, or yellow, partially or maybe undeveloped. And here's the new boundary in orange that's pulled in to exclude this area. It excludes the airport and the tech park, and excludes this area over in Indian Head. Also, there's one other area on St. Charles. In the 2006 plan, the residential land uses in these areas were 1 unit per acre as a base, but they could grow up to 3 to 5 units per acre with the use of transfer of development rights. We had previously talked about designating this as a suburban large lot from 1 unit per acre, but this is essentially the same density as we had before. And to clarify this, our suggestion is to designate it watershed conservation district, and then utilize the transfer of development rights up to the suburban large lot density limits of 1 unit per acre. So when we make those changes, it essentially expands the watershed conservation district to this previously deferred area and in the Bryans Road area as well. And it creates more of a uniform land use boundary. So this area in the Bennsville area would be allowed some development with the transferring development rights, whereas the other areas would be more restrictive, just to the 1 unit per 20. The third area that we wanted to clarify is the priority preservation area in Nanjemoy. And this was the map that was presented last week by the staff to reflect the changes as discussed. But going back through that record, we realized it was the intent of the proposal to match it more closely with the previously developed merge scenario plan of a few years back. So we corrected that map on the following graphic, and we'll update the acreage in the final plan also if this is adopted. And here's what it would look like. These two areas would essentially merge together into the final priority preservation area. And that acreage I have is now 134,168 acres, which is approximately 46% of the county. And the fourth area I wanted to bring up today is some clarification on our discussions on the rate of growth. We had previously noted that we didn't think the amendments would directly affect the rate of growth, but going back through the amendments, we documented that these changes would reduce the development districts, both the deferred district and the development district, by 28,840 acres, and approximately half of that is vacant or undeveloped, so I think it would have some effect on the overall rate of growth in these areas, while the rest of the county may experience the same rate of growth. And this was the land use map presented last week, and with these changes that we've discussed, here's the new version that's been posted online and is out in the hallway for the public hearings this afternoon. And I think that was all I needed to present this afternoon, and we can open it for discussion with the commissioners before the public hearing, or just close, whatever your pleasure.
Are there any comments or questions on this presentation? Commissioner Robinson.
Just a comment to thank you and thank staff and thank the mystery map maker, Glenn.
Glenn Gorman, yes, I forgot to mention his name, but Glenn Gorman is the guy that made all of these maps happen in a short period of time, and we really appreciate his effort.
So please pass on thanks to him from us as well.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a proposed amendment that I made last week, just to make sure it's clear. I made it a proposed amendment that the comprehensive plan would indicate that there would be a provision for between 10 to 15% of the houses in a new subdivision of 20 or more units would be moderately priced dwelling units. I want to make sure that I was clear that I'm talking about home ownership. I'm talking about people buying homes. I'm not talking about more apartments. And I know I had a few questions, and after the article that came out in the paper, I wanted to make sure that I was clear to the public and the staff that we're talking about subdivisions of homes being built, not apartments. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other comments at this point? Okay. Before we move on, the schedule is that we'll have our public hearing this afternoon and evening, and then next week we will then have each of these proposed amendments, whatever proposed amendments there are, will then come forward next week, and they will be voted on. Those that are accepted, they'll goes back to the planning staff. You will then reorganize, rewrite the comprehensive plan, and then bring that back on July 12th. That's the schedule as it is now for a final vote. Is that what you have as well?
That's how I understand it. I would just like to add that they need to be formally moved. So
yeah, on next week.
On the 28th.
Absolutely.
Correct.
It has to be actual. These are, up to this point, these have just been proposed amendments. Next week, they will be actual amendments, okay? And motions will be made. Okay, with that being said, yes, Commissioner Rucci.
Yeah, I would just like to make a public statement, apologize to the Planning Commission for all the hard work they did and all the hours they spent. And we're basically taking the plan and changing everything. And a few of them are asking why are they there for? So I just want to apologize for what's going to happen to their plan. So I want it to be known.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, before we move on, if there's anybody else now that would like to make any other proposed amendments, this would be the time to do that today. Okay, Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you. Page 3-26. Under actions 8, letter E, it states support other efforts to implement the airport land use study that are not specifically related to land use or zoning issues. That statement is very vague, or really vague, and I know based on other decisions and conversations that it probably will be removed. So I would propose that that statement be removed. Not clear. Chapter 3, land use. I have a proposal, a proposed amendment for changing the land use. Again, it goes back to what I was discussing last week, wanting to see more of a transition to the Waldorf area, to the more rural area, to use a more our land use of suburban large lot district. So to support that idea of the different types of housing in the county, my proposed amendment would be to revise the land use map for the southern area of St. Charles, changing the land use from residential to suburban large lot residential to 1 unit per acre.
Can you slow down a little bit?
Sure. I can repeat that. Revise the land use map for the southern area of St. Charles, changing the land use from residential to suburban large lot residential. And of course, that's the 1 unit per acre. And to describe the area for staff would be south of Billingsley Road and the Regional Park and Industrial Park, but north of 488, which is La Plata Road, and east of St. Charles Parkway. No problem. And again, as a reference, if you look at the draft plan on page 3-12, it describes the uses for the suburban large lot district. And I do believe that this is this would be a perfect area for that. It would be a good transition. And lastly, page 10-32. In the community development section under housing, it's my understanding that the previous plan, the 2006 plan, addressed the housing stock for the county. I'm proposing, and I could work with staff to, based on the other changes, to see if these numbers work. But the whole ideal here for page 10-32 under 10.3, where it says provide a mix of various housing types, to continue that statement to include to achieve a future county housing mixture of approximately 80% single family detached units, 15% townhouse units, and 5% apartment units. So that would be under the goal 10.3. Again, 80% single family, 15% townhomes, 5% apartments. And then under the actions, to go along with that goal, which is page 10-33, the action staff, if you would address an action to ensure that planning, growth management, permitting process is aligned with the housing stock policy. And Mr. Ball, I will provide my notes in writing. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Are there any other proposed amendments at this time? Okay, fine. With that, I think...
I have just one question. Would you like us to present these new additions at the public hearing along with the other changes today?
I think they have to be presented.
Yes,
Wouldn't hurt.
we're presenting all of the changes this afternoon.
Oh, then include these, then, please.
Okay, we'll make the changes to the presentation and include these in.
I know it doesn't leave you a lot of time, but we would appreciate it.
We can do it.
I know. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, see you soon.
Okay. Yes.
Next on the agenda is closed session.